Welcome, traveller. Draw close to the fire and rest your bones. The tale you are about to hear spans many seasons, many scars, and more secrets than a wizard's grimoire. This is the true accounting of Gareth, ranger, watcher, and keeper of oaths, as recorded by the scribes of the Thornwall Compact in the 43rd year of the Amber Age. Let none say the telling was embellished. Let all who hear it understand. In the realms, every arrival carries consequence. Every stranger who steps through a village gate changes it, however slightly, forever. The village of Milbrook sat at the crease between the civilized world and the wild one, that uneasy seam where tilled fields give way to ancient root and shadow. It was not a place of renown. No bard had ever composed a ballad about Milbrook. No cartographer had taken particular pride in marking it. It was the sort of settlement that appeared on regional maps as a small dot, and the notation, population roughly 200, which was accurate on a quiet day and generous after a hard winter. Gareth came to Milbrook on a grey spring morning, when the mud was thick and the sky the colour of old pewter. He came leading a horse, a dun mare of equally advanced years, one ear half torn from some long-ago disagreement with fate. And he moved through the settlement's single main road with the unhurried confidence of a man who had passed through 1,000 places and been chased out of perhaps a dozen. He wore a travel cloak of deep forest green, practical rather than fine, mended at the left shoulder with thread of a slightly different shade, a detail noticed only by those trained to notice such things. Beneath it, a leather jerkin stitched for movement rather than display. His belt held a long-bladed hunting knife with a bone handle worn smooth from years of grip, and at his back rode a longbow of impressive craft. Yew heartwood with horn knocks, the bowstring fresh and carefully maintained. He carried a full quiver of arrows fletched with grey goose feathers, each shaft uniform in length and spine to within a hair's breadth. He was perhaps 60 winters by the reckoning of his face, but 60 winters in the way that certain oaks are old, not diminished, only more themselves. His hair had gone silver white at the temples, his beard close-cropped and shot through with the same. Laugh lines creased the corners of his eyes, though anyone meeting his gaze directly found those eyes contained very little laughter. They were the eyes of a man who had looked at beautiful things and terrible things with equal steadiness, and who had learned not to blink first. The cottage he claimed was small, stone-foundationed, and had the look of a place that had endured by sheer stubbornness. Its previous tenant, one Oswin the cobbler, who had met his end in the blizzard of the Year of Three Moons, had left behind a chimney choked with jackdaw nests and a roof that allowed as much weather in as it kept out. Gareth set to it without complaint. He rethatched the roof with river reeds cut at low tide for maximum pliability, a technique from the wetland ranges of the Fensward coast, not native to these hill country borderlands. He repaired the chimney with locally quarried fieldstone, binding the upper courses with a clay and lime mortar that would outlast his tenancy. In the lean-to beside the cottage, he established his workshop. A fletching bench with integrated holder pegs, a bowyer's vice fashioned from a split log and 2 iron bolts, and a row of small hand-carved hooks from which hung bundled materials. Sinew, hide strips, lacquer, feather bundles sorted by species and stiffness. Above the door he hung his sign, a length of planking with the image of 2 arrows crossed over a quiver, neatly carved and scorched with a heated iron to permanent dark. Beneath the image, in the plain block letters of a man literate but not bookish, woodcraft and fletching. It was not a sign that promised luxury or artistry. It was a sign that promised competence. In a borderland village where a poorly made arrow meant a missed shot at supper, or worse, a missed shot at something that was stalking you, competence was more valuable than artistry by a considerable margin. Behind the cottage, no more than 40 paces from the back door, the Shadowveil wood began. It was ancient forest, oak and ash, and yew intertwined in canopies that filtered sunlight to a permanent greenish dusk. The villagers of Milbrook maintained a cautious and mostly respectful relationship with the Shadowveil. Children were taught the edge, how far they could go before the wood stopped feeling familiar. Hunters worked its margins for deer and boar. Woodcutters never went in pairs of fewer than 3, and never after midday. Gareth had walked the Shadowveil before he'd hung his sign. He knew it better than anyone in Milbrook suspected, and what he'd found in its deeper reaches, old game trails used by things larger than deer, faint orc spoor that was months cold, a stone marker carved with a symbol he recognized as a territorial boundary, claimed by a goblin warband now scattered. He kept to himself. The wood whispered of no immediate threat, but it whispered. His first customer arrived on the 3rd morning. Old Marta from the general trade post, a woman the approximate shape and disposition of a rain barrel, who came bearing a bundle of warped arrows belonging to her grandson. The arrows were, in Gareth's private assessment, an insult to the craft. Shafts cracked at the nock, fletching glued with what appeared to be pine sap rather than proper hide glue. Tips socketed with the care of someone performing the task for the last time rather than the best time. He repaired them in a single afternoon, saying nothing of his assessment. He returned them straighter, truer, and better than new. He charged a fair price. Marta paid it with the expression of a woman who had expected to be cheated and was mildly disappointed to have been treated honestly. She left muttering about outland prices, which Gareth took as professional success. By the week's end, word had spread as word does in small places, not through any announcement, but through the inexorable gravity of useful things. 3 more villagers arrived with bow work in need of attention. A hunter from the eastern fields brought a bow with a delaminating limb. A farmer's wife came with a crossbow so long out of use that Gareth had to explain to her gently that the dry rot in the stock made it a hazard rather than a weapon. He declined to repair that one. She seemed relieved. The Thistle and Tankard was Milbrook's one inn and alehouse, a squat stone building with a sign depicting a mug wreathed by thorned plant matter that might have been a thistle or might have been artistic license. Gareth became a regular presence there by the end of his first week, not to drink deeply, but to be seen drinking moderately. A man who visited the alehouse was a man with no particular secrets. A man who avoided it was one who had too many. "You've the look of a soldier about you," ventured Tom the Cooper one evening, a big-handed man in his 40s who made barrels with the absent ease of long practice. "Or a sellsword, maybe? Seen some blood?" Gareth's smile was precisely calibrated, warm enough to seem open, thin enough to discourage further inquiry. "Seen enough to know when to avoid it, Cooper, and enough to string a bow that'll keep your boy alive if the wolves come calling." The speculation flowered immediately, as it always did, and Gareth let it bloom. In his experience, a village that thought it knew your story left you alone. He's a deserter from the king's levy. Nay, a noble's bastard in hiding. Mark me, he's a wizard's man, sent to watch the wood for the black things that walk there at winter solstice. Gareth heard the echoes of these theories in Marta's store and at the blacksmith's forge, and felt the comfortable weight of a man who has successfully become other people's problem to solve. He was none of those things. He was something considerably more complicated. But complexity does not fit comfortably on barroom tongues, and so he let the simpler stories stand. Blackwood's tannery occupied the southeast corner of the village proper, far enough from the residences that its productive smells were a matter of knowledge rather than direct experience. Aldrich Blackwood was a thick-set man of 40-odd years who wore his profession in every crease and stain of his hands, and who regarded new arrivals with the measured skepticism of a man who had watched many travellers pass through and learned that most of them wanted something for less than it cost. Gareth traded fair, good silver coin and 6 fletched arrows. Not his best work, but honest work, every shaft true and every fletch seated square, for a bundle of sinew cord and a section of supple hide suitable for bow grips. Aldrich ran a thumb along the fletching of one arrow and made a sound that could have been assessment or admiration. "Fine work," the tanner said, with the economy of a man who gave compliments only when they'd been earned and couldn't be avoided. "You teach?" "When asked," Gareth replied. He noticed the boy. He noticed most things. Aldrich's son, perhaps 12 years old, broad across the shoulders in the way that meant he'd be built like his father inside a decade, watched from the tannery doorway with alert dark eyes that missed nothing and revealed little. Gareth filed the observation away. Bright Hammer Remedies occupied a narrow but well-kept building 3 doors down from the general store, its window box filled with dried herbs in bunches, yarrow and feverfew for poultices, dried mushroom caps Gareth recognized as coming from the Shadowveil's deeper reaches, and, half concealed behind the more common stock, a bundle of something grey-silver and faintly luminescent that he would have wagered considerably was Moonveil fern, a plant known primarily to those who worked the deep wood and used in certain preparations that had nothing to do with treating fevers. Widow Lisa ran the shop with the brisk efficiency of a woman who had long ago made peace with the fact that healing people was excellent work and terrible pay. She was sharp-eyed, sharper-tongued, and she appraised Gareth with the clinical thoroughness of a healer who saw every new visitor primarily as a set of potential ailments. She sold him beeswax-based salve against blister work and a preparation of willow bark compound for the deep ache that had taken up residence in his right knee after an old injury that had never quite healed. She charged him correctly. Her daughter Ilara stood in the back of the shop, doing something with a mortar that required neither hurry nor apparent attention. But Gareth caught her watching him from beneath her lashes, with eyes that were taking his measure by some calculus that had nothing to do with commerce. She wore a green ribbon in her hair, Shadowveil green, the particular shade that came from certain plant dyes only the wood provided. She smelled of the same herbs as the Moonveil bundle in the window. He nodded to her as he left. She nodded back, exactly once, with the gravity of a professional acknowledgement. He understood. The healers knew the wood. Those who knew the wood knew to ask few questions. And those who asked no questions were frequently the most observant people in any room. 3 months passed. Autumn came to Milbrook as it always did in the borderlands, not gradually, but in a single firm declaration overnight, the leaves turning as if on command from some administrator of seasons. The wood behind the cottage became a tapestry of ochre and burnt red. The light changed. The deer moved differently. Gareth's business had quietly become essential. Each dawn he walked the wood's edge. Not the same path twice in the same week. Pattern was the enemy of safety. He read the trail signs the way a scholar reads text. The pressed grass that meant a boar's regular overnight route. the stripped bark at shoulder height where a buck had rubbed his antlers, the faint, disturbed soil where something had paused at the tree line and looked toward the village. Wolves, probably. Thin, but not starving. He kept that note. He watched for orc sign, for the kind of careful camp placement that meant organized bandits rather than opportunistic ones, for the territorial markers of anything worse. He found nothing immediate. The Shadowveil whispered of no current threat. But borderlands had their own rhythms, and 3 months of quiet was no guarantee of 3 months more. He slept light, bow within reach. This was not anxiety. This was craft. The courier came at dusk on a Tuesday when the crows had been louder than usual, which Gareth had noted and filed as either meaningless or significant, and had spent the afternoon inclining towards significant. He came on a hard-ridden horse to a lightning-scarred oak at the wood's fringe, where Gareth had, on his 3rd day in Milbrook, tied a scrap of red cloth to a low branch. It was a signal the old houses used, a signal of conditional trust, of, "I am here and willing to hear." Only those trained in the network would know to look for it or understand what it meant. Master Gareth. The courier's voice was low, professional, a man accustomed to delivering messages in forests after dark. His name was Halric. Gareth had known him for 15 years and trusted him as much as he trusted anyone who carried information for coin, which was to say, provisionally and with verification. Gareth stepped from shadow, hand casual on his knife hilt. "Speak plain, Halric. You've ridden far." "Aye, and the winds blow ill." Halric dismounted without ceremony, keeping his voice below the sound of the horse's breathing. "Your suspicions bore fruit. Lady Vera moves in secret. The plans are laid, not this harvest, but the harvest after next, when the Lord's levy is rebuilt to strength. Taxes first, then men-at-arms. They call it annexation. Milbrook's fields and its timber are marked for the coffers of the house." Gareth's jaw tightened. "And Lord Caden? Blind or bought? The steward believes bought, but cannot prove it. There are those still true to the old ways. You know their names without my speaking them. The word is, if the winds turn foul, ride north to the old safe-hold. We will have need of eyes like yours." Halric paused. "And perhaps more than eyes." Gareth clasped forearms with him. Brief, firm, the grip of men who had shared fire and hard country, and did not need sentiment to communicate regard. "Tell them I watch, and that I remember oaths unbroken." Halric mounted and vanished into the tree line with the particular efficiency of a man who had been vanishing from places for 20 years and had reduced it to an art. Gareth stood alone under the lightning-scarred oak. The red cloth fluttered in the rising evening wind. He returned to the cottage. He did not drink that night. He sat at the fletching bench with a shaft half done in his hands and thought about oaths, which were, in his experience, the most expensive things a man could carry. He had made several, some to institutions that no longer existed in the form he'd sworn to, some to people who had died since the swearing. The one he had made 3 years ago, to the old Lord Steward in a cold anteroom after a long and terrible winter, was of the kind that did not expire simply because circumstances had changed. He thought about Lady Vera, whom he had met twice at court functions, and whom he had assessed immediately as a woman of considerable intelligence deployed in the service of considerable ambition. He had not imagined her a threat then. He had imagined her correctly, only underestimated the timeline. He thought about Milbrook, about old Marta and her muttered pricing complaints. about Tom the cooper nursing his foam-topped mug, about Aldrich's son at the tannery door with those watchful dark eyes, about Ilara and her green ribbon and her Shadowveil herbs, and the question her gaze had asked him that he hadn't answered because he hadn't known the answer yet. A house turning from protector to predator. He had seen it before. It began with taxes, always with taxes, because taxes were the bureaucratic form of an army's advance, arriving before the soldiers and taking what the soldiers would eventually come to enforce. By the time the men-at-arms appeared at the village gate, the village would already be broken in the ways that mattered. He finished the arrow shaft with the precise movements of a man thinking through his hands. He set it in the drying rack. He looked out the small north-facing window at the Shadowveil wood, black against the moonlit sky. He thought about Aldrich's lad, the one with the watchful eyes who had been listening at the tannery door. 12 years old, big for his age, quick-looking, in the way that went beyond the physical. A man alone could only watch so long, and watching, in the end, was not the point. The point, the old, hard, inconvenient point, was to ensure that what was worth protecting had someone capable of protecting it. It was time, perhaps, to take an apprentice. And so, the first thread was drawn. In the great tapestry of what was to come, the wars, the alliances, the betrayals, the small acts of courage performed in cold, dark places with no audience, this was the moment the needle first touched cloth. A man in a cottage, an arrow in a drying rack. A decision, unmade aloud, settling into the bedrock of him like water into stone. The boy at Blackwood's tannery had no name in this chapter. He would have one soon enough. And with that name would come a story that would outlast its telling. The story of Cale Blackwood, apprentice to a man of no past, keeper of oaths, and before the accounting was complete, a ranger of the Thornwall Compact, whose arrows were said to fly truer than any made by mortal hands. But that is for another chapter and another fire.